FM WBNY Buffalo. Ready for radio that's challenging, innovative, and encouraging? Tune in, Living for the People.
This is L. Nathan Hare. Join me right here, 91.3 FM WBNY. Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 9 a.m. after Amy Goodman's Democracy Now! We'll provide objective analysis regarding current issues. Call 878-5104. It's Living for the People on 91.3 FM WBNY.
WBNY Buffalo.
The views expressed on the following program are not necessarily those of 91.3 FM WBNY, the United Students Government at Buffalo State, or Buffalo State itself. Due to the opinionated nature of these programs, listener discretion is highly advised. If you have any questions or comments about today's program, you can give us a call at 716-878-5104.
You held on to those documents.
All right, welcome to Living for the People. This is L. Nathan here. Welcome you to our broadcast, focused on providing you insight into events shaping our national and regional world and the facts behind those events and policies that are shaping our world for today and for tomorrow. Join us weekly on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. following Amy Goodman's Democracy Now! Program. And of course, you know our program is live, so you can call and you can join our discussion. We really hope that you will. Our number here again is 716-878-5104. That's 716-878-5104. Of course, we're here with our in-studio audience of one, Norm MacArthur. How you doing, Norm?
Good morning, Mr.
That loud clapping is Norm's two hands.
Good morning, Mr. Hare.
All right. And of course, we have our citizen of the 21st century who has the ability to live stream these programs. We can get it out to you in the best medium possible. Willie H. Welcome, Willie.
Welcome, everybody, to Living for the People with L. Nathan Hare.
So listen, we've got, it's not news. It's just the flow of how the affairs of our country are moving forward. I don't know how many of us are grasping the situation this way. But what we have had is the normalization of hostage taking by one part of the federal government against the rest of the federal government, literally holding the entire nation by hostage, as a hostage. And what is happening is the media, after you say hostage, 3 weeks ago, then three weeks ago minus 1 day, you say hostage again. Then I guess to the media, it's, we said that 2 days in a row. What do we say today? Well, negotiations, we're now at the stage of getting the parties to negotiate. And then that's turned into getting Joe Biden to negotiate. Then that's turned into, well, what's Joe Biden's red line? How far will he go? And that's turned into, why is he overseas in the G7 talks, with the other nations in the Pacific Rim, focusing on the economy of the entire United States in relation to the world? Why is he bothering to do that? Is that what presidents do? Or do presidents sit down with a pencil and work with Kevin McCarthy, and come up with, the ransom for the hostage?
Well, I think there's a lot of negotiations. There's war looming, financial crisis, all types of stuff going on.
Well, there's a lot of stuff going on, but what if that has anything to do with the debt ceiling? See, because I'm trying to help us to see the world in clear terms, not the befuddled terms that are being spoken by, the political opponents, or by the media itself.
So you think they're trying to sidetrack this? That's basically what they're doing.
Well, I think that they're milking this situation.
Okay.
And they don't care what the consequences are. Milking is when you keep saying that all Democrats are pedophiles, they're child molesters, they're kidnapping kids and then serving them on trays in pizza parlors, on Wisconsin Avenue in Washington, D.C. When you say stuff like that and keep repeating it over and over and over again, you get some barely sane people and some that are not even barely sane people that hear what you're saying and they get wired up. They say, "Oh, is that true? Oh, that's why that kid I used to see, last week, that's why I don't see him anymore. He's been kidnapped. He's been turned into whatever they turn people into in pizza parlors on the serving trays. He's like Pinocchio or Donkey Island, in Great Expectations, and I mean, it's that kind of craziness that gets in people's heads. And then they go out with AR-15s and they break into a congressperson's office and they shoot 2 people. See, this is what happens when you let these runaway thoughts just run away, and you don't check them.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying now.
So that we get clear now, the debt ceiling. What is the only decision that has to be made, and what decision, and who is involved in making this decision on the debt ceiling? Mm-hmm. Now, I won't go right now into all of what the debt ceiling is, but I just want you to understand that you have credit cards. Mm-hmm. On your credit card, on your bill, when you look at the bill, it'll give you like itemization, all the stuff that you bought on that credit card.
Right.
But on the right side of the bill, usually in the lower right-hand side of the right side of the bill, it'll have something called the credit limit.
Right.
And when you hit the credit limit, you can't put anything else on that credit card because you have a credit limit.
And I was there, sir.
You know what I'm saying?
I was there.
Right? And it's okay. I mean, many people have visited the credit limit on their credit card. Now, the United States doesn't have a lot of credit cards, only got one. It's the federal treasury. And the Congress established a limit on how much money the federal treasury can borrow to pay its bills. And to move that limit up from where it is to where it needs to be in order to pay the bills that you have right now, that requires a decision by Congress to do it because it requires a law. And laws begin in Congress. So the only decision that's in front of the country right now is whether or not to raise the debt limit, not whether or not we should continue to fund housing, education, and welfare. It used to be HEW for those that don't know the old construction of or the federal government. This is not a discussion about whether or not we're going to continue to have a Department of Education. This is not a discussion where I forget the governor in Texas who couldn't remember which 3 parts of government he was going to get rid of. I won't even go down that road again. My point here is that the decision that is before the country, before Congress, is whether or not to raise the debt ceiling. The issue of how much money we're going to put into education, how much money is going to go into the IRS, how much money is going to go into the Department of Interior, how much money is going to go to weights and measures. The decisions about how much to fund the different activities of the federal government is a budget decision. That decision is made in a budget process, something called appropriations. Let me get into this in the way that I had laid it out so that I'm not just scattering, because I get carried away in my thought process here. But we're approaching this deadline for reaching an agreement that Janet Yellen talked about a day or so ago. She's saying that based on her reading of how many dollars the United States has been able to collect from its tax-paying residents. You know who those people are, right? Do y'all know who those people are?
Who are those people?
They're called American citizens.
Oh, that's us. Okay.
Yeah, you, right? The tax dollars come from you. And so Janet Yellen has to figure out how much revenue you can expect to receive over the course of a fiscal year so that you know how much revenue you have to pay for the expenses that you have.
Right.
The expenses are usually a little bit easier to project because you budget them than are the revenues, because revenues people have to give you. Expenses you make.
Right.
So you know how many expenses you've incurred, right? But revenues, you got to, that's like Hope for Chevrolet, right? please send your tax dollars in. Don't cheat me, right? And so on, right? So what Janet Yellen has been doing, that's what Treasury does, is assessing, what expenses have we incurred and are we going to incur between now and the end of the fiscal year, September 30th, and then how much revenue have we taken in, and based on what we've taken in and from different sources, how much can we expect to receive going through the rest of the year to September 30th of this year. September 30th is the last day of the fiscal year. That's the end of the fiscal year. So, once you get into October 1st, you're into another fiscal year. So that's a different dilemma altogether. So what Yellen is saying is when you look at revenues and you look at expenditures, we're going to be about $1.4 to $1.6 trillion short in terms of having enough money to pay all of our obligations that we have incurred for the year that started October 1 of 2022 and will end September 30th of 2023. That's what's in front of us, that gap. So that gap is generally taken care of by borrowing. We borrow more money, to pay for that gap.
Right.
Now, what should be taking place, and, now we got to get into the Willie H. economics, okay?
Yeah. Well, I hope this is true.
Yeah. Willie H. economics say, I actually owe more money this year than I'm going to make.
That's correct.
I'm going to have to borrow some money.
That's correct.
I'm going to need to figure out how I'm not only going to pay for the expenses that I've already incurred,
right,
but how am I going to pay for this note that I'm borrowing?
DoorDash. I got to do DoorDash now.
How am I going to do that?
That's exactly what it is.
And so that's why Willie's running around here. Y'all keep saying, what's Willie doing? Every time I look around, I see him, he's DoorDashing because he's making extra money.
That's correct.
So he can pay his extra bills.
That's correct.
Okay? Now, Willie thinks that the federal government, being smarter than he is, because he's only been around for his lifetime.
Right.
Federal government's been around for 245 years. They must be smarter than him.
Right.
They must know that if you borrow money, you have to pay the money back.
Exactly.
And you need to earn more revenue
and get something extra,
or lower your expenses,
right,
so that you have more money to pay off the borrowing that you just did.
That's correct.
Because the borrowing doesn't go away until you pay for it.
That's correct.
The only way to get rid of borrowing is to pay for it.
That's right.
Willie H. is saying that, but, he's a 21st century dude. The rest of us are still in the 20th century.
I would think that's common sense.
We haven't figured out yet that the other side of the equation is you have to actually pay your bill.
Yeah.
We have to pay the bill?
Yeah.
You mean when we borrow money, we have to pay it off?
Yep.
Yeah, that's true. You got to pay it off. And while you're getting around to paying it off, you're paying something called interest, like the rent you're paying on the money that you borrowed, right?
Right.
So that's our reality. But the media is giving us the impression that this is the same conversation, the debt ceiling issue versus the budget.
Mm-hmm.
They're not. Budget, so we have three sets of laws. One law is the law that creates the laws that govern taxation, and revenues, right? That's one law. Or one framework of legislation that Congress is engaged in. A second framework of law is appropriations. Now, I want you to understand appropriations. To appropriate means that you are actually taking a part of your budget authority and you're applying it to a particular function. So if you feel like you're going to spend, just as an example, $4 trillion, in the course, or say $5 trillion in the current fiscal year, out of that $5 trillion, you're going to allocate, say, 900 billion. It was a billion? Yeah, you're going to allocate 900 billion to defense. That's a decision that you're making,
wow,
right?
It's a lot of money.
A lot of money, but that's what you chose to do.
Mm-hmm.
So in order to do that, you have to appropriate that money. So you may have the authority to spend $5 trillion, but the authority to spend a portion of that money on defense, you have to appropriate that money. So that's the second realm of fiscal authority that Congress is engaged in. The third realm of that authority is your borrowing limit itself. Once you figured out what revenue you're going to get from taxation, and then you figure out how much you're going to spend, the problem here is when you do a budget, you're doing the budget based on what you expect you're going to get in terms of revenue and what you're going to incur in terms of expenses. Mm-hmm. But the appropriation that is assigned to a particular area of expense might not be the same as what you approved in your budget bill. This is the strangeness of American governance. Congress can actually change the budget through an appropriations bill from what you had actually voted on and approved as a budget to a different appropriation. In other words, let's say your appropriation bill had $400 million for testing people for coronavirus or Omicron, whatever they call this thing, right? Let's suppose that's the case. But let's suppose that the reality is it's going to cost $600 million to get that done because there's so many people that need to be tested. You appropriate the money, you budgeted $400 million, but then you appropriated $600 million to pay for an expense that you only funded for $400 million.
So you can appropriate, it can go up or down.
Right. You shouldn't be able to do that. Somebody should slap you upside the head for doing that. In fact, that's how you should know that you're doing something wrong. Somebody should come along and slap you upside your head and say, what are you doing? You can't appropriate more money than you have.
Right.
But this is America. And in America, they have magic, financing.
Right.
So in magic financing, you can appropriate money that you don't even have.
Yeah.
We talked about this 2 years ago in this space. I told you at that time that what is happening now is not going to be sustainable. You cannot keep spending humongous amounts of future money on the hope and prayer that somebody's going to earn that money and create taxation on that money that doesn't even exist yet, that will turn into revenue coming back into the federal government that will pay for these bills that we're incurring right now. That was dumb. We said it at the time. That was dumb. That's dumb economics. That's Ronald Reagan economics. You know what I mean? Trickle-down economics, put more money in the hands of the fat cats, then they'll go out and do more business. They do more business, they'll hire more people. If they hire more people, there's more income. If there's more income, everybody's doing better. But that's not the way it goes. You just said that.
No.
Just because you say it doesn't mean that's the way it's going to go.
No.
What actually happened is those fat cat businesses took $800 billion of that money that you let them keep in their pockets,
right,
and they use it to buy back, largely they use it to buy back the stock in their own companies. Mm-hmm. By buying back the stock in their own companies, they made the stock that was left more valuable, and that gave the people who were stockholders higher equity in their holdings with your companies, in addition to getting dividends from the profits earned, by those businesses.
Right.
So they basically pimped every one of us.
Right.
You probably didn't know that the reason why you had those little bruises on your sides and whatnot, that's from them straps on the saddle that they had put on your back and whatnot, right?
Well, that's America to me. The pimp game is America.
Absolutely.
Mentality.
The country that keeps on pimping.
Yeah, they started that way and they keep doing
it. They just can't change.
Yeah.
See, so it's important for us to understand this context, because here again, we're in a situation where the media is acting like Kevin McCarthy is doing something of worth because he's saying, well, Joe Biden, what's he doing over there in Japan? Running around there with those world leaders. He should be back here with us with his pencil and paper working out what our debt ceiling ought to be. Yeah. No, he shouldn't. because to work out the debt ceiling only requires one moment of a thought. Just say yes and you're done. Do a Nancy Reagan. Well, she'd just say no for her, right?
Mr. Biden is doing presidential things what he needs to be doing, and I think he's trying to utilize projection on us. You know what I mean?
What Kevin McCarthy is doing is what the Republicans always do when they're in control of something. They use it as a wedge, or they create bottlenecks. Yeah. And then they use that to create leverage on you because they feel you're going to be responsible. They don't have to be responsible. They can be irresponsible because what's the consequence? They're going to lose votes. They're already losing votes. So there's no consequence to them to do what they're doing. The consequence is on you. Look at the polling numbers that are coming through. They act like Joe Biden has done a terrible job as the president of the United States. He lowered the deficits by $1.7 trillion. The budget that he's put forward before Congress on, I think it was March 9th of this year, the budget he put before Congress would lower the debt by $3 trillion over the course of his next 4-year term. So what more would you add? You lowered unemployment from over 6% to 3.4%, right? African-American unemployment is below 5% for the first time in my lifetime.
Wonderful. Yeah. Hallelujah.
In turn, aren't you lowering the rate of inflation as you do that?
And as we do all of that, we're lowering the rate of inflation because we had a huge bump in inflation at the 2020. Because remember, we shut the economy down by about 40% in 2020. When the economy was then opened back up in June, July, August of 2020, you had all of these people that had been laid off of work that are now coming back to work. You got much more money coming into people's households. Plus you had all of the subsidies, that fake unemployment stuff that you all were doing, giving people $600 a week. Oh, we won't talk about that. I know y'all have to talk about that. But the point I'm making is that we did all of these inflationary things to pump the economy back up because America is a consumer economy. So in order to pump the economy back up, you got to have money in the hands of the consumers. So when they did that, that pumped up inflation. So by the time we get into 2021, we start to see the consequences of this. People had to, or businesses had to pay more money for their workers because workers figured out, I can live without having to work for you. I work for you for $10 an hour and I'm busting my can. I can work over there at McDonald's and I can just turn a dial on a machine. It'll flip the hamburgers, cook the hamburgers, put the condiments on the hamburgers, even put them on the buns. I don't have to do anything. I'll do that job rather than work for you, right?
With that said, didn't it create individuals open up their own businesses?
Of course.
Entrepreneurs.
The gig economy, right? So all of that occurred. A lot of people figured out different ways to go than the way they had been going, money. Right?
Yeah.
So in order to draw them back into your offices or in your production facilities, you had to raise your salaries that you were paying people. Right. All of that creates inflationary pressure. If there's more money, but there's not more product, the price you're going to charge per product is going to go up. That's what happened. So something that was the basic function of the economics of the structure of the American economy, the Republicans were successful in blaming that on the Democrats. Well, that's the Democrats' fault. How is it? That's the nature of the economy. That's not the Democrats' fault. The fact that the economics were brought under control. Now we're talking about, instead of 9%, inflation, we're talking about 5% inflation, and we're still dropping, every month, going forward. Now, instead of having 6% plus unemployment, we have 3.4% unemployment. We have 2 jobs available in the country for every 1 person who's looking for a job.
Has it ever been lower than that? Lower than 3.4?
It has been, but remember World War II, everybody had a job called being a soldier, right? So we had very few people that were unemployed. during that time period. But the point is that, over the last 70 years, this has to be the lowest unemployment rate that we've had in the past 70 years.
Okay. Yeah.
So obviously somebody's doing something good, in the economy. And we have a much higher numbers of people that have health insurance than had it 3 or 4 years ago, because the Democrats have continued to preserve the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, what you all call Obamacare. The Democrats have maintained that effort, kept it intact. As a result of that, when the pandemic went down, that healthcare apparatus that was funded and built around Obamacare became what everybody became dependent on. That's where everybody got shots, where everybody got vaccinations, where everybody was getting tested.
Right.
So as negatively as the GOP talks about Obamacare, it really is a pretty good program.
Many of the GOP governors went all in on funding Obamacare in their states.
Wow.
Because they knew that they were not going to be able to save the citizens of their states if they didn't continue to maintain and improve on Obamacare.
Right.
Okay.
Well, here's what I got to say. I back in the past, I made lots more money, but I feel like I make much less money now, but I feel like I'm being taken care of as far as my medical needs, my food needs. There's places where I can get thrift stores where I can get cheap food. There's food that's being given now. There's a lot of things that have improved my life now that I make less money than when I was making triple the money back then. So sometimes I feel like I'm living better now than back then when I was making triple the money.
And when you were living large and all of that big money you were making, weren't you a Republican then?
No.
Come on now.
I was a little conservative, but I wasn't a Republican.
You and Bruce Smith, you were both in the same line. We're over here in the Republican line. See, when you were getting more money, we don't want to have taxes because I'm getting money. I don't need taxes. Until the dreadful day comes.
Right.
Norm, we've talked about this, right? In every person's life, I don't care how big, bad, strong, cunning, smart, whatever it is you think you are, in every person's life, sooner or later, the dreadful day will come.
Yeah.
That's going to be the day when your ability to master the events and circumstances of your life are lower than the actual circumstances and events that are driving your life.
Right.
Once you find yourself in somebody else's control, other than you being in control of yourself, you are now facing the dreadful day. Yeah. Okay?
Right. That's right.
And government is supposed to help you get through those dreadful days. That's why we have government in the first place.
Right. Taxes,
otherwise, why bother to have a government? Why don't we just all live in teepees, a mile and a half apart from each other and just, do it on our own? We don't do it that way because that doesn't work out, right? This is the smart way for us to live as human beings. Excuse me. So it's important for us to understand this is a con game being run on us, that Biden is somehow doing something wrong for going to Japan and participating in the G7 nation conference, which is where they work out the trade relationships, the give and take between countries that sets up the structure in which we function in the world economy. And if he didn't do that, what position would we be in if he didn't do that?
Right now, the way that things are, as far as the state of the world goes anyway, he should be in a summit like that, because we have to cater and work out friendships, between different countries, and and we have to make sure that that we're friendly with countries that'll be allies.
And how long does it take for the Republicans to just pick up the phone and say, "Okay, Joe, we're going to raise the debt ceiling," and click up?
Right.
I mean, that's all they got to do, right? Right. The other issues that need to be addressed are budget issues. So you could raise the debt ceiling by $6 trillion. Just because you raise the debt ceiling by $6 trillion doesn't mean that you have to spend the $6 trillion.
That's right.
You can raise the debt ceiling by $6 trillion, and you can lower expenses by $6 trillion if you wanted to, and you'd have $12 trillion in excess spending authority, but you don't have to spend it. Just because you have it doesn't mean you have to expend it. So we should be driving expense issues through the budget process, and we should not be constraining the country through the debt ceiling process. That is just where I'm saying that we need to go. So listen, I hear that sound that says that you're halfway through. So let's take a quick break and talk to our sponsors. Please stick with us. We will see you on the other side of the break here at Living for the People at 91.3 FM WBNY.
91.3 FM WBNY is proud to present Democracy Now! With Amy Goodman.
Welcome to Democracy Now!
Award-winning investigative journalism.
Is the NRA imploding?
Providing relevant analysis that makes you think.
Secret State Department documents, including evidence of U.S. war crimes.
Fact-finding reports you will not hear elsewhere. Democracy Now! Airs Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. on 91.3 FM WBNY Buffalo.
The sun's shining, birds are singing, and all feels right in the world.
Until the season changes, and suddenly everything seems darker, less lively, and you lose your motivation to get out of bed.
If you struggle with depression, you're not alone. In fact, 1 in 5 people experience some form of depression, and no matter the time of year, it may affect your behavioral or physical ability to live a happy life.
At the American Psychiatric Association Foundation, we understand what you're going through, and we're here to help. Our vision is to build a mentally healthy nation for all, because we want you to live your best life and be your best you all year round. We work every day to eliminate stigma, combat mental illness and substance use disorders, and advance mental wellness.
If you or someone you love needs help, you are not alone. Please visit mentallyhealthynation.org to learn more.
Ready for radio that's challenging, innovative, and encouraging? Tune in, Living for the People.
This is L. Nathan Hare. Join me right here, 91.3 FM WBNY. Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 9 a.m. after Amy Goodman's Democracy Now! We'll provide objective analysis regarding current issues. Call 878-5104. It's Living for the People on 91.3 FM WBNY. All right, welcome back to Living for the People. This is L. Nathan here, your host. We're here with Norm Carter, who is our in-studio audience of one. Welcome back, Norm.
Thank you, Mr. Hare.
And we're here with our first citizen of the 21st century, Willie H., who does the live streaming of the program. Welcome, Willie.
Welcome, everybody, to Living for the People with L. Nathan Hare.
So I want to take a little bit of time, this segment of the program, to help us understand not just the hypocrisy of what we're doing as a country, but structurally how we are undermining our own future. Now, what do I mean by undermining our own future? If I make $10,000 a year, and I built a life structure around making $10,000 a year, so I'm spending maybe $300, a month for rent, and because I live like a polar bear, I only spend $50 a month on electricity and gas, and I gotta have $200 for a car and $50 a month, for car insurance, so I built my life structure, around.
Hold up, Mr. Hare. That sounds pretty cheap I remember I was paying like $700 a month for all the expense for my car. It's $400 all you pay for your car?
Well, this is a hypothetical, so
okay.
Just work with my hypothetical numbers.
Because those are low numbers.
The truth is, $10,000, you couldn't even exist in the United States. If you're living by yourself, you couldn't exist on
right. That's correct.
$10,000, right? Correct. But just to make the numbers easier for us to wrestle with.
Okay.
So I do that. And then I follow the Willie H. model of, man, I see something over there. It's glittering. It's shiny.
This guy know me too good. Stop it.
There's lots of people circling around looking at it. Boy, if I had that thing, I'd be the center of attraction. I would be the dude. And so Willie scarfed together some money by not paying his utility bill, didn't pay his car note, didn't pay his insurance note, and he went and bought that glittery thing. Now that he bought it, they said, well, glad you bought it, appreciate that, but I need for you to pay for it now. Well, what do you mean pay for it? Yeah, this is the rule. You can't steal it, you have to pay for it. And so Willie says, okay, I'm willing to pay for it. What I got to do? They said, well, we got something called Brown Shirt credit card.
Right.
It's got like a MasterCard or a Visa logo on it, right? And you can get one of these things, and then you can pay for it with this, and then you'll just owe the credit card. You won't owe me anything. I'll be paid, so I'll be cool.
Right.
You just owe your credit card something.
Right.
Now, for those of you that don't understand, owing your credit card and owing the department store is the same thing. You still owe the same money,
and even
right?
with the credit card interest.
They're just hustling you when they give you the impression that you've paid your bill because you charge it to your credit card.
Right.
You still owe the bill.
Right.
So let's suppose that Willie did this and now he owes $1,000. Now, Willie being a very intelligent, although, covetous, envious, wanted that glittery thing, but he's also intelligent. He says, man, I'm going to have to pay for this thing some kind of way. How do I pay for it? I know. I don't need the car anymore. Okay. I'm going to give him back the car. And since I don't have the car anymore.
I did that one too.
Since I don't have the car anymore, why do I need car insurance? So I give him back the car insurance.
That $700 a month I was talking about is gone.
$700, knocked it out right away.
Yep.
And guess how much his note was for that glittery thing that he bought? It was $700. So he's paid his bill. Now his life is really terrible because he's walking. He's calling people up every day to get a ride to go from here to there and whatnot.
Hey, stop telling my story, Mr. Stop it.
But because he's accountable, he's paying for what he bought.
Right.
He lowered his expenses. He couldn't increase his revenue like he wanted to, but he lowered his expenses. Then he met Norm. And Norm said, well, Willie, what you doing, man? Why you out here with your hand out all the time, with your thumb out there trying to thumb a ride someplace? Why you acting like that? And then Willie said, well, Norm, I don't have much money. I only got $10,000. And Norm said, well, maybe your solution is to make more money. How about that? Make more money? I could make more money? Yes, it's legal in the United States for you to make more money. You can go to DoorDash, okay? So when you're not sleeping,
right,
and you're not at your other job,
right,
you can be at DoorDash. Go and delivering stuff for people and whatnot, right? And you can make, the $75, $150 a day.
Right. That's correct.
And that can pay that note that you owe.
That's correct.
Now, you might not be able to sleep very much.
No.
Okay, but, sleeping ain't all that important.
That's right.
Paying your bills are important. Right?
As long as I get 6-7 hours, I'm good.
Now, I'm being facetious, but you can see that that's not the framework that we're operating on in the United States.
Wow.
Wisdom would say that if you are structurally underwater, you are receiving less money than you're expending. You have to make some miraculous adjustments immediately.
Right.
You can't make the adjustments tomorrow. You have to make the adjustments today to pay for tomorrow. As I said to us 2 years ago, when we borrowed, and Willie will tell you the truth, we argued about this. We borrowed $6 trillion.
Woo. Lord have mercy.
And Willie even asked me the question. He says, where are we borrowing that money from? I said, we're borrowing the money from the future. Willie said, who? Who is the future?
Is that a rapper? Future?
Exactly. That's like 50 Cent.
Good analogy. I like that. Good analogy, 50 Cent. 50 cents on the dollar.
We're borrowing against something that has not happened and that we have no assurance that it ever will happen.
Right.
We're just gambling that it's going to happen, right?
Right.
That's what's happening to us right now. Wisdom would say that you would find ways to lower your expenses because you can do that by yourself. You don't need any event to happen. You can just lower your expenses.
Right.
Now, that means that some people who are getting perks for living in the United States won't get those perks. You know, people that live next to a park, maybe they won't be housing next to a park. You got to live over there next to that concrete factory, you know, and so on. Maybe you don't get 100% help on your utility bills. Maybe you only get 70% help on utility bills. Something has to give.
Right, right.
Because you can't count on the future.
Right.
You can hope for the future, but you can't count on the future. Now, if you hope for the future and the future actually shows up, you'll have more money than you need to be able to pay your bills. That's a good thing. Put some money in the trust, in the federal government savings account. Put the money there. Don't spend the money. How did this happen? When Bill Clinton was president, we talked about this. His last year was his last year was 2000, but the fiscal year that he was in went from October 1 of 2000 to September 30th of 2001. In that fiscal year, Bill Clinton ran a surplus. Did you all know that?
No.
He ran a surplus of about $128 billion for that year. A surplus.
I haven't. You don't hear much about a surplus.
No, they don't talk about that.
You don't hear that.
See, because
especially if it's a Democratic surplus.
And because it would mean that you would start focusing on, well, what did Bill Clinton do
Right.
that created that surplus? Then you would say, well, why don't we start doing that now so we can create a surplus tomorrow from the deficits that we're running today?
Yeah.
So what happened was Bill Clinton, realizing that you got to pay your bills, he put us on a track where we were earning new revenue that we had not been earning before through increased tax rates and fees and sales of properties, you know, and things like that. He created the revenue stream that gave us more revenue than we were taking in than expenses that were going out. That's how he got us on a glide path
Right.
leading to surpluses. If we had stayed on Bill Clinton's model, by the time we got to around, this would have been maybe 2006, 2007, 2008, we would have been in a position we would have no debt at all.
So let me be clear, Mr. Hare. So when President Bush took over, what did he basically went directly off of that path, and
Yes.
and the taxations that were going on, he eliminated.
Right. What he did was he sold you. You were probably 10 years old at the time, but he told you. He said, you know, tell Norm that he don't have to worry about taxes and whatnot. We're probably taking too much money out of people's pockets with our tax rates. How do we know? Well, because you ran a surplus. If you ran a surplus, that means that you collected more money than you needed to be able to run your government. So the Bush administration and the Republicans that surrounded him, they got together and said, that's true. We're overtaxing people. We should reduce our revenues that we get from taxes, as if they forgot that 8 years earlier, we were running humongous deficits where our overall federal debt was somewhere around $4 or $5 trillion. Bill Clinton got that down to around $3.3, $3.4 trillion on a glide path to wipe that debt out completely over the course of the next 6 or 7 years. Okay? But what George Bush did is he ran on a campaign that said that Americans are being overtaxed by the federal government. And the proof that you're being overtaxed is that you had a surplus in 2000.
Okay, I just have to ask, Mr. Hare. Now, us and me being, I guess, citizen for the people, it would seem to me like most people are intelligent enough to figure out that this particular path that we were on.
Willie, write that down. Did you hear what he just said?
What did he say?
He said most people are intelligent, and then the rest of the words that he said. Write that down. among those hypotheses that people keep talking about.
Yeah, I mean, but I'm just saying, with that being said,
Because if we were all that intelligent, we wouldn't be doing what we're doing right now.
we're doing, yeah, but you elect who you elect.
That's true.
And that is the way that policies are changed. But most people would see if that path was working for us and put us on a surplus path, we should follow that particular
But
path.
what most people bought into was the seductiveness of the argument that the Republicans were making. It's a seductive argument because on the surface, it makes sense. If I'm spending if I'm receiving 128 billion more in revenue than I'm expending, then it means that I'm getting more money than I need to be able to pay my bills.
But what citizen would go against that? If you know what I mean?
Virtually all the citizens of the United States went for it, okay? That's why you elected George W. Bush, okay? You elected George W. Bush because he gave you a lie that you wanted to believe.
Wow.
And you bought it. The reality is that you needed to stay on the glide path that Bill Clinton had put us on so that we would have realized the complete eradication of our debt.
Have we ever had a surplus other than this particular time?
Oh yeah. We've had surpluses in the past, in the United States.
But this was a model of what
our debt goes up and down. But it's because the earlier times the country was driven by people who thought that it was bad to have a debt. So whenever we hit a situation where we expended more money than we took in, we immediately did things as a country to reduce our expenses and increase our revenues.
And also in earlier time, we didn't outsource our business.
Right.
We kept our business in-house.
Right.
And we dealt with things here in the United States.
Right.
In the United States, right here. And, we
That's why we call it pimping. Those burns, those little bruises you have on your side and whatnot, that's where the straps go, for the saddle.
Yes, sir.
Right? That's why they're there, because they're pimping us, right? And we've been seduced with the arguments that they have been giving us. They give us the impression that we've overtaxed people. Let me help us with overtaxing people. This gets into the article that was written, who was this? Ganesh Sethi. He wrote this article for CNBC talking about U.S. lost more tax revenue than any other developed nation in 2018. Here's what this is about. We had a lot of stuff going on in 2015, 16, and 17. We had been spending all of this money. Willie kept authorizing these wars in 2001 and 2003. He said the defense industry was going broke unless we have another war. So he said, well, I'll give you 2 wars. And how about Syria? We'll stick that one in there. And, what else? Oh, here's a pandemic. Here's 2 recessions. So
a lot was going on.
we were in some trouble, right? And so the issue that the country was facing was, how do we re-stimulate the country's economy? Now, remember, we had a recession in 2008, 2009, 2010. The Obama administration put together strategies to get us out of that recession, re-stimulate the economy, lower unemployment, and move the country forward. What did the Republicans do? The Republicans met together on the same night that Obama won in November of 2020, and they promised, we're going to do everything we can, everything in our power, to see to it that Obama is a one-term president and to see to it that he fails in every single thing that he does.
Right.
So every move that the Obama administration made was always muffled up, taken much longer than it needed to take, given less force than it should have had because of this constant obstruction by the Republicans.
Right.
But Obama succeeded anyway.
Right.
We went through a 78-month period of continuous growth in private sector employment, averaging over 220,000 new jobs a month, every month, for 78 months in a row.
Wow.
That's what Obama did for us. But the media and the Republicans constantly hammered that, well, the recovery was slower than recoveries, should have been. When we look at a recovery in 1959, 1960, in the recession that we had then, that recovery got done in 2 years. When we look at the recovery in this period or that period, it was faster than the Obama recovery. Now, the reason why it was slower is because Republicans were doing so much obstruction to prevent it from being successful in the first place.
Right.
But the media didn't talk about it like that. They talked about it as if it was a failure. Now, Obama pulled us out of a recession that should not have existed in the first place. It was caused by Republican policies. Pulled us out of that recession, got us into a much lower unemployment rate, got our deficits down from over $1.5 trillion to around $500 billion. Tremendous impact of the Obama administration, changing the healthcare system, making it more reliable and embracing a lot more of the American public. Did so many things that helped America, but they treated it as if it was always not quite enough, not enough. So now you get Trump, showing up, and Trump says, "I'm going to set you free." I forget the exact, vote for me, right? And I'll set you free. And so, he set you free, right? And so we went through the Trump administration, and the Trump administration did the same thing that the Bush administration did. The Trump administration said, well, we are overtaxing people, even though we were running deficits, which meant we couldn't have been overtaxing people. We wouldn't be running deficits, right? He said, no, we're overtaxing people. If we lower taxes by 40%, we will stimulate such tremendous growth in business that they will grow their businesses, they'll hire more people, we'll have more income. Everybody's going to be saying happy days every day. It'll be like Calvin Coolidge, a chicken in every pot, and so on. Lying through his teeth. You could tell when he was on TV. You could see feathers coming out of his molars and whatnot, lying through his teeth. But Americans wanted to hear that lie.
Yeah. Well, Mr. Hare, I guess I'm a little slow, but I'm kind of getting it right now. It seems almost as if they said that they wanted to lower taxes. The American public ate that up, and they did lower taxes, basically lowering taxes for all of these businesses and different things, which saved them billions and trillions of dollars for themselves. And, that's what they wanted to do. They served their own self-interest when they did what they did.
Right. And the thing is, the people who are going to benefit from lowering these taxes are not the people that are doing the voting.
Right.
Because the people that are doing the benefiting, there's only 6 of them, right? I mean, how many billionaires are there in the country? Like 6, right?
Right.
The people that are voting for these people, there's like 160 million of them. They're voting for these people thinking that these people are going to help them. They're never trying to help you, ever. There's never a time when they are trying to help you. They're always trying to help themselves.
Yep.
But they sell you something that you can't buy. You have to just have somebody give it to you.
Yeah, I learned that in corporations, working at Walmart and all the other big companies. They always come every year. Oh, we're going to do this for you. By the end of the year, you realize they took another thing away from you every year. They keep taking.
But how do they seduce you? Because remember, you always do what is in your own self-interest.
Yeah. Right. They dangle that carrot in front of you.
So since the things that we're talking about are not in their self-interest, they're not in your self-interest, why are you voting for these people when they're doing things that are not in your self-interest? Because something else is in your self-interest that's even more important to you. And what's more important to a large segment of the American public, I believe even a majority of the American public, what is more important to them is their position in the governance of American society, in the framing of what is normal, what is best, what is most desirable in American society. And what they frame is Euro-American descent is what is most important. That's the number one thing. And the thing that is threatening them is the possibility, no, not the possibility, the very likelihood that in 15 years, this will be a majority minority country.
It will.
And when that day comes, we're going to be on the tipping pot, right?
Right.
That we're going to cross this barrier, and once we cross this barrier, you're not going to be able to go back. That means you're going to end up with Hispanic people being president of the United States.
That's true.
You're going to end up with Asian people being the governors of states and president and vice president, and so on. That's what they are concerned about, that we're going to go from being number one in everything to being number two or number three or maybe nobody, in everything. And we just can't accept that.
Right.
That's what the Republicans are selling. That's what Marjorie Taylor Greene is selling. That's what Matt Gaetz is selling. That's what Paul Gosar is selling. All of those people who are the agents of white nationalism in this country, that's what they're selling. And that's what American people are buying. And that's why they're doing things that are destructive to their own self-interest.
Right.
Go ahead.
I really saw it when Barack became president. I remember hearing, because, the churches and all people, some of the, especially people, white people, and they were saying the world is over, the devil is in the White House. So, and now I did understand why Republicans, which are, can't think of the name, but conservatism, why they were against Barack Obama, because to them, their world was in turmoil. Their world
Your
was
Tea Party type people.
Right.
See, and so it's important to understand that context, because the principle that drives everything is the principle of self-interest. Self-interest underlies everything. If you see people doing things that damage their own self-interest, you have to ask yourself other questions. What is really in their interest that overrides these things that they are accepting that are not in their interest?
Right.
And it's this issue about the supremacy of Euro-American people in this country. That's the number one thing. Now, let me just we only got a couple of minutes. Let me just shape this for you contextually. When you look at all of the countries in the world that are doing well, that have healthy economies in a democratic system of government, when you look at those countries, you look at how do they compare to the United States. So one of the ways you can look at this is look at their tax rates or their revenue generation rates, generally tax rates. Look at that in comparison to the gross domestic product of that country. In other words, your GDP is the overall economic output of your country. How much of that economic output is used for taxation? Because taxation represents the investments that you're making in your society using carve-outs of the revenues that come in from the businesses in your society. So if you got a company that's making $10 million and you're spending $1 million of that $10 million on taxes, those taxes makes it possible for you to make the other $9 million, because that $9 million is paying for roads, it's paying for dredging rivers and bays, it's paying for health care, it's paying for public school education, and so on. All of those things create the environment that makes your ability to have a $10 million business in the first place to make that possible, right? So that's really what we're looking at. If you look at the United States, look at the other countries in the world, they spend about 34% of their overall GDP on taxes. But the United States only spends 24% on taxes. That difference of 10%, if we applied that to the $31.4 trillion GDP that the United States has right now, that would be an additional $3 trillion that would come into the treasury of the United States. if that money came into the Treasury of the United States, you would wipe out the deficits right now. In day one, you would wipe out all of the deficits, and in 20 years, you would wipe out the entire debt of the United States. Why is that not being done? To do it, you only have to go back to the tax rates that we had in 2016, the last Obama year tax rates. If we went back to those tax rates, we would wipe out the deficits immediately, and over the next 19 or 20 years, we would wipe out the entire debt. Why is that not the conversation that's going on in this country? Because when you're doing things that are not obvious to do, there has to be another agenda. And what I'm suggesting to you is the other agenda is what we've talked about so far. So listen, folks, we got to keep staying on top of this stuff. If we don't, this thing's going to get away from us. So we look forward to talking to you all on Friday here at Living for the People at 91.3 FM, WBNY. We'll see you all then.